we genuinely get into the video, I must explain what microcephaly means, since it isn't as widely known as many other conditions, and although it can be associated with the Zika virus, this isn't that kind of story. The name microcephaly is driven from ancient Greek, meaning small head. This is a more rare condition which isn't widely known and tends to be coupled with many other symptoms. The main focus with micro is head and brain size. Many times, the head is much smaller than what it's supposed to be. Not always noticeable, but it varies from person to person. I myself was born with microcephaly, sensory processing disorder, central auditory processing disorder, and learning disabilities. These things affected my life on the daily, leading to my mom looking for answers constantly. My aunt had once told my mother about this preacher named Katie Souza. She's got a large ministry, and through her, God heals many people. After a couple of years of knowing and listening to Katie, she was having a conference across the border from us in Port Huron, Michigan. Leading up to this date, March 16, 2017, I dreamt of Katie Souza 3 times, and in each dream she prayed for me. But even before my mother was told about Katie Souza, the Lord had spoken to me. He had told me of her and what He wanted to do through her for me. Although, since then I had forgotten these things and only remembered her name when it was respoken. I was very determined to go to the conference, knowing it would be a struggle because of these issues I had been born with. However, to cope, on the way I listened to music by Britt Nicole. One of these songs happened to be titled Breakthrough, and I prayed into it. I knew I wanted a breakthrough of some sorts, but I never once considered what the Lord had planned. I had a sense that day that something good was going to happen during this conference, but I did not know the significance of what was to come. I remember after hearing Katie preach that night, as it was a 2-day conference, we were allowed to head to the front of the room, give an offering if desired, and worship. Both me and my mom were determined to get up there. I distinctly remember the song that was being sung as I made eye contact with Katie Souza. The song was Dunamis Power, and I froze in my spot when I made eye contact with Katie's. She isn't one to come and pray for everyone, but she felt led by the Holy Spirit to come towards me. She knew nothing of my history, nor could she see it. Although she came and prayed for me, it was a simple prayer, and sometimes that's all that's needed. Katie prayed that I'd feel more at peace and see angels around me more. That was it. Simple, quick, and loving. As soon as Katie finished, told me she loved me, and returned to the stage, I knew right then and there something was different. I could feel it instantly, and a huge smile crossed my face. I had turned to my mom and I told her my microcephaly was gone. How did I know this? 1, because I could feel it, and 2, my world was changing instantly. I know not everyone believes in miracles, but I do, and I experienced this major healing. One I never expected to happen, and each and every day I thank the Lord for doing it. To this day, something changes. Something I notice is different than it had been before. Each aspect of my life is new and whole again, thanks to this healing. If Jesus can heal and restore life, raise people from the dead, I believe He can heal people's brains and body. For in the Bible, Jeremiah 30, verse 17 says, "But I will restore you to health and heal your wounds, declares the Lord." My brain was compromised. I felt as though there were huge walls between each segment of my brain. They blocked signals, diverting them, changing them, making my learning much harder than the average person. When the Lord healed me, I felt these walls break down, and those signals began communicating properly. Each segment of my brain began working properly, and my understanding grew on the spot, allowing my vision of the world to grow bigger and the tunnel that I had been living in. It even felt as though God had taken segments of my brain out and replaced them with new, rewiring them in and out. My thinking changed, and I didn't have to focus extra hard on one thing. I could turn my focus to something and block out the rest that didn't need it. A good example of how my brain worked before and after is like a desk full of papers, pens, pencils, and dishes. The whole desk was once covered with these things, unable to set the dishes apart from the cups and the pens apart from the pencils. Each time one got separated and understood, the desk was knocked over and each thing got messed up again. But now these things are organized, understood, and easy to separate. A huge issue that I always associated with micro was the fact that I always had a constant headache. It wasn't major, nor did it affect my lifestyle, as that was all I ever knew. This headache felt like a big rubber band constricting my head and putting pressure on my eyes. My eyes would constantly hurt if I was focusing on learning something for a long period of time, making the headache worse. When I got healed, the headache disappeared and the pressure no longer lingers. Before I was healed, I had a very poor working memory. I could hardly keep a whole sentence together in my head before speaking it out to my friends and family. I would take a sentence that I wanted to speak, but by the time I got to the end of the sentence, I would lose the front. When I'd go back to gather the front of the sentence, I'd lose the end of it. It was an ongoing cycle that I stressed over daily, making explanations exceedingly difficult and exhausting. But now, I have no difficulty creating sentences and speaking them out. They come out of my mouth as I'm able to create them inside my head. It's almost like a train, a functional train that never runs off the rails. I used to revert to thinking in emotion rather than words because of the difficulty it would bring. But since being healed, I'm able to think and speak in words, both in unison, and the stress that I used to feel has diminished and drastically. The physical side of this incredible healing isn't as noticeable as many of the other aspects. The size of my head indeed has grown since, although isn't the size a normal head should. It indeed has grown, and all this matters to me. I don't need my head to be the same size as others for this miracle to be life-changing. My head size went from 49 centimeters to 50 centimeters, and my head used to be in the shape of a pear. It has now lessened drastically. Again, not perfect, but I don't need it to be. The back of my head is nowhere near as flat as it used to be, and since my head has stopped growing, my neck has grown stronger. As my head had grown and changed shape, my neck muscles used to get tired of holding my head up, as it was heavier than what it used to be. Hearing is something that's extremely important to many. Whether you can hear or not, it defines a lot about a person's life, or so we've been told. No one can truly say the lengths of someone's hearing can go, for it always changes and differs from one person to the next. Hearing used to be a big problem for me, not in the fact that I couldn't physically hear, but it was compromised just like my brain. I believe this couples and leads into a lot of other aspects of my healing, especially sensory processing disorder. But before we get too far ahead, allow me to explain. I used to have a very loud ringing coupled with a very loud roaring noise in both my ears. It was much louder in my left than my right, and this ringing was so exceptionally loud, as some might say ear-piercing. Sound drastic? Yes, it honestly does. But when you live your life in such a manner and get healed of it, any sound that remotely reminds me or sounds like that bothers me. These noises within my ears were so drastically loud that I could never hear myself speak or sing. Even when shouting, I could not hear myself. This caused me to have a lot of trouble understanding what my teachers were saying from the front of the classroom. But now that this has been healed, I can hear myself speak and sing. At first, it was weird as I didn't know what my own voice sounded like. Yes, most of us hear ourselves speak much differently than what our peers might hear. But in my case, the voice that I hear and the voice that I speak with are one and the same. Even when recorded, it sounds the same to me. Why that is? I don't know. The improvement in my hearing is amazing for my left ear. The one that I had the loudest ringing and roaring in is now the ear that I hear the best with, even better than my right. When I'm able to listen to music using an earbud in my right ear while having a conversation and listening with my left, something I could absolutely not do before. It always had to be taken out of my right ear or even pause as well to focus enough on what was being said. Since my hearing has improved so much, I'm even able to identify different sounds coming from different directions around me. This was most certainly not the case beforehand, causing me to jump at every time a noise came my way, even if it was just my father walking behind me. Sensory, what an interesting thing. It defines a lot of our life whether we realize it or not. It's something we've learned since we were babies. We grow and learn, touch and see. Just as one feels with their hands and feet, would it ever occur to you that maybe someone out in life cannot understand what it is they touch? Or maybe they cannot tell how close or far something is from them, despite growing up the same, touching and interacting with the same stimulations as others in the world? Sensory is a huge aspect of everybody's life, whether we know it or not. It's a fact of life. But for someone like I had been before my healing, it caused a mighty issue. It was worked into everyday life, whether it was wanted or not. It felt like my whole life surrounded everything sensory and it could never be avoided. As one might be able to tune something out or turn something off, I was not. Things never lined up or fell into the right boxes, no matter how my brain attempted to process and decide. I could talk for a very long time about how sensory issues did a lot and how different things are now. This segment could get very long and I'll try to keep things less lengthy. A major issue of these sensory issues in my life was the fact that I could never tell where I was in space compared to another object or person within the same room as me. No matter how I tried, how hard I focused, it never worked the way it should have. It's difficult to explain the feeling of not understanding where a person is in space compared to your own body. If you could not feel a single blade of grass beneath your feet, would it be possible to know where a whole other human being was? This was my everyday life. I relied on my vision to provide input of where things might be around me. It was definitely not perfect, but it was something I could use and it helped me greatly. If the lights were turned out in a room and was pitch black, I'd lose my sense of where I was in the room. I could not picture anything around me. The couch was gone, the tables were gone, and even the chairs were gone from my memory. It would seem as though I was in the air and nothing was around me, unable to identify anything surrounding me. Frightening? Most definitely. Along with the sense of not being able to tell where I was in space compared to another person or object, I couldn't feel anything beneath my hands or feet. These two linked together, and it might sound like I'm repeating myself, but to me, these things were huge changes when I was healed. The feeling of not being able to feel the floor beneath you was weird, even though that was all I ever knew leading to my healing. Now that that has gone, and I know where I'm in space compared to everything else, feeling the ground beneath me, it's insane to think that was how I used to live. I no longer have to stomp as I walk, attempting to feel anything beneath me. I don't have to stay awake and fall asleep due to tiredness because I don't feel like I'm falling through the mattress and into the ground as I close my eyes. How would it feel to you if it felt like you were either levitating above or sinking through the ground beneath you? To this day, I am grateful to the Lord that He has healed me of these things. It's mind-boggling, and I do not understand that myself and many other people deal with this every day. This is only the beginning of the sensory imbalances I faced before my healing. Like the fact that if you cannot feel yourself in space, how will you know if you're standing straight or slouching? I never could, as I always felt as though I was leaning really far back, even though I actually was slouching most of the time. It no longer feels that way, and my posture has improved. There are so many more things in this category I could go on about, but I think we've gone on long enough. If anyone has any questions or is genuinely interested, leave a comment. I'd love to try and get back to you about your questions or thoughts. Enough talk about things that used to be before my healing, and look forward to things that have improved or continue to improve. This healing has improved my brain and learning. But aside from that, it's changed a lot of my emotions and my mental aspect as well. Thinking in words rather than emotions helps a lot, and the feeling of tiredness and being mentally exhausted have decreased immensely. Everything feels less overwhelming than it used to be. However, it's not to say that I don't get overwhelmed anymore or even burnt out. Those things still happen. I'm still human. But it takes a lot more to get me there. I'm able to make decisions quicker and easier. I'm able to read my mother's cursive writing and even read in general much quicker. If you can believe it, even quicker than my mom. Emotions are a very tricky thing. Hard to understand, hard to control. Going from one extreme to the next is difficult, and although it doesn't give me any excuses, I have learned a great deal about them. I might still have difficulty with them, as all humans do. It does not diminish anything from before to after my healing. I point myself back to Jesus every single time, for it's always about Him. I speak about this healing, about the changes it's done and how it's affected my life, so that maybe it can help another person, that maybe God will speak through me to someone either in a similar situation, give them hope, or whatever it might be. But as long as it leads back to God, I'm satisfied. To be satisfied in the Lord, the Bible says many things, but in the Psalms it says this. Psalm 107, verse 8 to 9. Let them be given thanks to the Lord for His unfailing love and His wonderful deeds for men. For He satisfies the thirsty and fills the hungry with good things. I have less anxiety than I had before. I used to be a constant thing within my life, and it's drastically diminished. My mind itself is a lot quieter, allowing me to not feel the need to have something in the background all the time, no matter the time of day. It might not seem like a massive thing to everyone, as these skills are learned age in life, but to me, each step forward, each thing learned is new, exciting, and life-changing, are massive. It boggles my mind, the difference from before to after my healing. Although I never understood why I was born with these conditions, and have had countless times of asking the Lord why, He's always drawn me back to the same Bible verses every single time. There are numerous times in the Bible where it's been stated of people either being born or having issues being healed or learning why they've been brought up that way. For example, in John 9 it says this. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. The disciples asked him, Rabbi, who has sinned, this man or his parents, that he may be born blind? Neither this man or his parents sinned, said Jesus. But this has happened so that the work of God may be displayed in his life. Meaning, this man was born blind so that God's glory could be shown through this man's life and told countless times to those who knew him before and after. God did the same for me. He allowed me to be born with these pressing conditions so that He may be glorified in my life. Isn't that incredible to think about? Even this has granted me a better outlook on life and future. How can one look at what God's done in my life and not think once, how can God be glorified through this? God does things with a purpose and a plan. He has taken what was once a downright troubling life and outlook and turned it into something glorifying. I cannot say how thankful I am to God for these things. Forever I will continue to thank Him day in and day out. He knows my heart. He knows the lengths I will thank Him even though I myself do not.